All right, everybody, welcome back. We are diving right back into the deep end of San Francisco politics today.
Jumping right back in.
You can say that again. We're talking about the kind of stuff that makes headlines, makes you want to tear your hair out, makes you wonder what's going on.
All of the above?
Definitely all of the above. And to help us break it all down, we have, once again, our expert, who I'm so glad could join us, back with us again to help us sift through these piles and piles of...
Meeting minutes.
You said it, not me. We're talking about those thrilling 3 sets of meeting minutes from the San Francisco Board of Supervisors meetings from back in April.
Yeah, April was an interesting month.
It really was. And I have to say, even as someone who follows this stuff pretty closely, there were some real surprises in these minutes.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, for starters, the whole Treasure Island development deal.
Ah, yes, that was a big one.
Huge. And the back and forth between Mayor Breed and Supervisor Peskin, it's like a political thriller playing out in slow motion over budget spreadsheets.
Well, you know what they say? The devil's in the details.
And believe me, these minutes are all about the details.
That's where the real story is, a lot of the time.
It's true. But thankfully, we have you here to help us separate the signal from the noise.
I'll do my best.
So let's start with that Treasure Island drama. The April 23rd minutes, in particular.
Oh, yeah, things got spicy.
They really did. You've got Mayor Breed pushing for this grand vision, talking about jobs, housing, the whole 9 yards. And then you've got Supervisor Peskin, our board president no less, basically saying, hold on a minute, where's all this money coming from?
He's right to ask those questions.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it went beyond just the numbers. You can feel the tension, this underlying power struggle over who gets to decide the future of San Francisco.
Right, because this isn't just about one island. It's about the city's priorities.
Exactly.
And who gets to set them.
And maybe even more importantly, who gets to control the purse strings.
It's always about the money.
Isn't it always? But it's not all about high finance and development deals. These minutes also get into the nitty-gritty of life here in San Francisco.
The everyday stuff.
Yeah. Like those proposed changes to the vending regulations. Small businesses, they're the heart and soul of this city, right?
Absolutely.
But some of these proposed rules had residents worried about noise, trash, all the things that can make or break a neighborhood.
It's a tough balance to strike.
It really is. And you can see that tension play out in the minutes. I mean, remember Supervisor Safay's insistence on that duplication request on April 30th?
Yeah, that was... interesting.
It felt like a power move, don't you think? Even though the ordinance passed unanimously, that whole thing just felt shut off.
Well, sometimes those procedural moves, they speak louder than words.
You think he was trying to send a message?
Maybe. Or maybe he was just buying time, trying to stall things until he could negotiate some changes behind the scenes.
Ooh, intrigue. I love it.
It's all part of the game.
And we're here to break down every play. So we've got hidden agendas, backroom deals, maybe even a little sabotage going on. What else are these minutes hiding?
Well, not everything in these minutes is about high-stakes drama.
Oh, you mean there's actually some, boring stuff in there, too?
You could say that. For example, those general obligation bond pass-throughs. Not exactly the stuff of front-page news.
You're telling me I practically fell asleep just reading the title.
Yeah, they don't exactly roll off the tongue, do they?
Not at all. But I have a feeling you're going to tell me they're actually super important.
They are, especially for anyone who rents in San Francisco.
Okay, so explain it to me like I'm like a goldfish who just won the lottery and suddenly needs to understand municipal bonds.
All right, so imagine you're renting an apartment, right? And your landlord gets hit with a property tax hike.
Okay, bad news for the landlord, probably even worse news for me as the renter.
Exactly. Because in the past, landlords could often pass those tax increases directly onto their tenants, meaning higher rents.
Yeah, that's the worst. Yeah, it's a tough situation. But these bond pass-throughs, they essentially put limits on how much of those property tax increases landlords can pass along to renters.
Okay, so that's actually kind of a big deal for renters.
It is. It's one of those things that might seem kind of technical and boring on the surface, but has a real impact on people's lives.
So it's like a stealth win for renters tucked away in these meeting minutes.
You could say that. It just goes to show it pays to pay attention to the details.
Even when they're about as exciting as watching paint dry. So what else caught your eye in these minutes? Anything a little more, shall we say, lively?
Well, how about San Francisco Independent Bookstore Day?
Oh, yeah. That was kind of adorable. I mean, it's not every day you see a resolution celebrating bookstores.
Right. It's like a little breath of fresh air amidst all the budget battles and development debates. So why do you think they did it? Was it just a feel-good measure?
Maybe partly. But remember, this was an election year.
So everything's political.
Pretty much. And there's nothing politicians love more than a good photo op, especially one that aligns them with a popular cause.
So it's like, vote for me, I support bookstores.
Exactly. It's what we call virtue signaling, showing off your good deeds and values.
And bookstores are a pretty easy sell here in San Francisco.
Exactly. Who doesn't love a good bookstore, right? But it also taps into this idea of San Francisco as a city that values art, culture, independent thinking.
It's like those Keep Austin Weird bumper stickers, but for literature.
Exactly. And those kinds of symbols, they matter.
More than we might realize.
Definitely. They shape how people see the city and maybe even how they vote.
So we've got hidden agendas, symbolic gestures, and a whole lot of political maneuvering. What else can we learn from these meeting minutes?
Well, sometimes it's not what's said, but how it's said. Or even how it's not said.
Ooh, cryptic. I like it.
For example, Mayor Breed's appearance at the April 30th meeting, remember that?
Vaguely. What'd you say again?
Well, she showed up and started talking about joy.
Joy. That's
Yeah.
oddly specific. Especially for a Board of Supervisors meeting. Usually it's a lot of, frowning and furrowed brows.
Exactly. And that's why it was so interesting. It felt very deliberate, a way of trying to shift the tone, control the narrative.
It's like she walked into a room full of people arguing about what color to paint the Golden Gate Bridge. I was like, guys, can't we all just appreciate the beauty of bridges?
Something like that. It's about trying to reframe the conversation, even if just for a moment.
So it's like a political power move disguised as a Hallmark card?
Maybe. But it worked, didn't it? I mean, we're talking about it.
True that. And speaking of things that work, remember those procedural moves we were talking about earlier?
You mean like Supervisor Safe's duplication request?
That's the one. It seemed like such a small thing at the time, but now I'm starting to think maybe there's more to it than meets the eye.
Well, it's all about context, right? And in the context of these meetings, even the smallest procedural maneuver can be significant.
So what was Safai really up to?
It's hard to say for sure. Maybe he genuinely had concerns about the vending regulations and wanted more time to review them.
Or maybe he was just trying to flex his political muscle.
Could be. Or maybe it was a bit of both. The point is, these procedural moves, they add another layer of complexity to the already complex world of local politics.
It's like a game within a game, and we need to know the rules if we want to keep up.
Exactly. And sometimes the best way to learn the rules is to watch how the players break them.
It's like we're in a political escape room trying to piece together these clues to figure out how to get out. Or at least how to understand what's going on.
And just like an escape room, sometimes the smallest detail can be the key to unlocking the whole puzzle.
So if we're looking for those keys, those hidden messages in these meeting minutes, what should we be paying attention to?
Well, it's about looking beyond the surface, right? Don't just focus on what's being said, but who's saying it, when they're saying it, and maybe even more importantly, what they're not saying.
Ooh, I like that. It's like those what's not shown questions on the SATs, but for local politics.
Exactly. You have to read between the lines, look for the patterns, the alliances, the rivalries, because those dynamics, they often tell us more about what's really going on than the actual words on the page.
Give me an example. Where do you see those dynamics playing out in these minutes?
Take the whole debate over the Treasure Island development. On the surface, it's about whether or not to build on some empty land. But if you look at who's for it, who's against it, how they're framing their arguments, it becomes about so much more.
Okay, so walk me through it.
You've got Mayor Breed, right. She's all about this big, bold vision for the future. Jobs, housing, a revitalized waterfront. But then you've got someone like Supervisor Peskin, who's much more cautious, more focused on the details, the potential downsides.
And those different approaches, they reflect different visions for what San Francisco should be.
Exactly. And those underlying tensions, they're playing out in every issue, every vote.
So how does it end? Which vision for San Francisco wins out?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And unfortunately, there's no easy answer. These meeting minutes, they're a snapshot in time, a glimpse into a particular moment in the city's ongoing evolution.
So it's like the story's still being written.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so exciting, because we all have a role to play in shaping that story.
So it's not just about reading the minutes, it's about being a part of what happens next.
Exactly. It's about staying informed, staying engaged, and making your voice heard. Because these decisions, they affect all of us.
Beautifully said. And on that note, a huge thank you to our expert for being here and guiding us through this maze of local politics.
My pleasure, as always.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Now go forth and be the change you want to see in San Francisco.